Unsung Heroes of South Asian Community. We have remarkable unsung heroes in our community who are making a profound difference, but sometimes we don't know about them or we hear them in passing. Through this podcast, it's our humble effort to bring those unsung heroes to you. Are you one? Maybe you know one. Reach out to Kunjan at ePadosi.com. Namaskar and hello, this is Kunjan, your host for the podcast in association with ePadosi.com, Unsung Heroes of South Asian Community. Narika, founded in 1992 by a group of South Asian women who actually identified that there was a need for domestic violence services in Bay Area. Since then, they have helped thousands of individuals get back to their life by putting the abuse and domestic violence behind them. I have Shailaja Dixit, Executive Director from Narika. Hello, Shailaja. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited.
Thank you. So, Shailaja, I'll start with a very, very basic question that there are so many domestic violence platforms in our community. What was the need for Narika to exist?
That's a great question. That's a great start-off question. So, Narika, as you said, was founded in 1992 by a group of immigrant women who were looking around at our community and realizing that there's a lot of domestic violence that happens in the South Asian community, but there aren't services that are culturally sensitive or responsive. So when a survivor is going through trauma, they really need to be able to speak in their language, get services in a way, and from people who look like them. Maybe if they're in shelters, have food and support look like what they're used to, get their comfort food. So there is such a need for culturally responsive services, and that's why Narika exists. Our specialty is to serve survivors in the South Asian community and diaspora. Not to say we wouldn't serve any survivor who would come to our helpline, but that's where our niche lies.
That's really good to know. And that's why you are here, because of the word, the South Asian community. So what services does Narika offers?
So Narika primarily offers crisis intervention services for domestic violence survivors, which basically means, it sounds like a big word, but it basically means we have a confidential helpline that runs from 9 a.m. Actually, now it's 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. on weekdays, and it's answered live by trained advocates. And I really want to emphasize it's a confidential helpline because survivors, especially women, when they're calling, they want to be sure that their information is not going to be made public.
Right.
It's a question of their safety and their privacy. So we have a confidential helpline. We provide emergency safe nights. That means 3 to 5 nights or a week or 2 weeks if you are trying to leave an abusive situation. We give transportation help. We give legal support. We give individual therapy support. We will also give. We have a lot of support groups that we offer because so many times survivors are, isolated or feeling like a loss of community.
Right.
And recently, I'm really excited to say, last year we opened our first transitional home, which provides support to services, up to 2 families. And we are very soon going to open our second one, again in the Alameda County. Other than the intervention services, which is pretty holistic, we also offer a prevention program that's for parents in our community, so that we are not only talking about how do we deal with violence after, but we're also talking about how are we going to remove blueprints of violence so that in the future we can actually prevent it.
That's amazing. So you have a plan and a mitigation plan.
There you go.
That's good to know. And I'm pretty sure the people who are listening, I hope nobody has to go through this. But if you are, there is help out there. And we'll share all the information down below in the description. So there is a big notion in our community that domestic violence in South Asian community does not exist. I'm actually getting goosebumps right now. So is this a myth or is this a reality?
Oh my gosh. So the reality is that the myth exists. So you're right. No matter where we present or when we do our outreach program or event or where I speak, everybody is always surprised. In our community, hamare community, like everybody feels this is a problem that happens to somebody else. So I'm so glad you're asking this. Domestic violence very much exists in our community, very much, no matter, regardless of like your education, regardless of your income, regardless of whether you're employed or not employed, it exists in every strata of our community. And up to 40 to 50% of women report experiencing domestic violence.
Oh, wow.
And now we're talking about the fact that it's reported. It's also an underreported crime. So there are so many places where women do not, and I keep saying women because that's primarily the population that's calling our helpline. But it also impacts men. We do have men who call our helpline. We do have LGBTQ folks who call our helplines. So I do think it exists. And I think the constant way the community minimizes and goes into denial is by saying it cannot be happening to us. But it does. You know, all of us look like we are living in perfect homes with perfect fences, with perfect cars. But the reality behind doors is very different. And that's why when a survivor speaks up, it's really important that we believe them.
Okay.
So, thank you for asking that.
Yeah, like I said, I had goosebumps when I was asking you the question. So, what is considered, like, for me, like, I am also surprised that in our community, the domestic violence exists. So, I'm just like you guys. But my question is, what is considered domestic violence?
Yeah. So second great question. So domestic violence, I think we have a stereotypical image of, you know, somebody hitting somebody with a black eye, or this sensational picture of somebody leaving the home with, you know, bag and baggage. But actually domestic violence exists in many ways. So very simplistically, if you were to think about it, it's a pattern of abusive behavior that one partner exerts over another partner to gain control over them. And it's a pattern. Generally, it will kind of increase over time, becomes more abusive over time. And it does not need to be only physical. Domestic violence is financial. So 99% of domestic violence cases the survivor will experience financial control. So you're either forced to work or not allowed to work, or if you work, your wages are taken away from you. And we've seen that happen to very high-paying, you know, positions as well. So domestic violence can be financial, spiritual, if you're not allowed to practice what your faith is. It can be it is emotional, it is verbal, it can be legal, especially if you're coming on dependent visas, which happens a lot in our community. Your documentation can be taken away from you. You're not allowed to, you know, apply for green cards. You don't know what your status is. They threaten that they will abandon you transnationally back home, and your children may be citizens, and so they are taken away from you. So it's not just one aspect. Domestic violence typically has many of these aspects. And in the Silicon Valley, there's also tech abuse. So people are tracking you, stalking you, you know, they're able to tell where you are. We have all these wonderful cars now where somebody can spot right away where you are, right? Your phone can track where you are. So it is almost like a cloud that surrounds a survivor. And many times, if there's no physical violence, it takes a long time for people to realize
that they are being...
This is abuse. Because, you know, when somebody is verbally abusing you, many times you're told, adjust kar lo. This is how they talk. Or people will say, tumne kya kiya? Or you don't answer back. You don't answer back. So it's minimized so much. The physical violence is still recognized, but emotional, verbal, spiritual, financial, that control is minimized so much that it takes a long time for somebody to realize this was abuse.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was going to ask, like, a follow-up question came to my mind. Being an Indian, everything is shared. It's a family.
Yes, it's a collective culture.
It's a collective culture.
Correct.
So if my salary, like I'm working, my salary is going in a joint account. But like now when you're mentioning, I need to have some discussion when I go back home.
Well, so that's the gray area that confuses everybody, right? Like you are hitting the heart of some of the things that we grapple with. When you live in a collective culture, you know, if you've grown up with parents who expect to have access to your phone and your passwords, if you are used to sharing your local, you know, your whereabouts with everybody, it's very difficult to tell when the control went away from you.
Exactly.
What
is that line?
What is that line?
Yeah.
So I think a good measure is, are you able to say no safely? When you say no to something, does the other adult in your relationship respect that boundary? And what is the consequence to you when you do not say yes? You know, so the question is, if you're sharing by choice and you're feeling good about sharing, please share. The question is, when you don't agree, or when you do draw a boundary, or you do say a no, are you still safe? Are you still respected? Do you really have a choice in the relationship? That's, I think, a very good measure of, you know, saying, is this a healthy relationship? Am I doing this by my choice? Or is there a force? Because coercive control can be so subtle.
Subtle, right.
Right? You forget and you don't know when your choice is gone from you. And so part of that work, prevention work, would be, do we understand and do we teach our children how to draw boundaries?
Right, which is very important.
Very important.
Very
Can we as
important.
parents take a no from our children?
Yeah.
Because if they don't practice a no with us, how are they going to practice no with their
Right.
colleagues or their partners or other people? So
That's really good to know. So make sure that you draw boundaries and stand with your boundaries, as long as it's not
healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries.
And hence boundaries are not something that's static. It's
Right.
not like it's always a no. A yes is sometimes also the boundary, and boundaries are fluid. So there are parenting modules upon modules on boundary making. But I think to exert your boundary. And then to be respectful of other people's boundaries.
Right. So it goes both ways.
Especially in our community, when a woman is drawing a boundary, there are so many people who look at her and say, that's not a nice person. It doesn't look nice. Sometimes boundary making is very ugly.
Right.
And so one thing I'll say to our community always is, if someone's drawing a boundary, a healthy boundary, support them.
Right.
Simplest thing you can do, support them. Don't talk bad about them. Support them. Show up for the survivor.
That's really good to know. So support is really, really important. So you did talk about support. So I'm going to ask the next question. Like, if I know someone, like you say, behind the doors, we don't know what goes on. But on social media, thanks to social media, our lives are public right now. Even when I drink chai, people know that I'm drinking chai. So if I have a friend or a relative, how do I figure it out what are the red flags? Like, she might be going through something which I don't see it, but how can I pick on those fine nuances?
Wonderful question, and I'm glad that we are raising that kind of a conversation and awareness. So I think some of the red flags that we often talk about is somebody's changed behavior. So people generally, when a survivor is going through an abusive situation, they will be isolated. Either they will self-isolate or they're going to isolate because of someone else. Like, the abuser doesn't want them to meet their friends. So if your friend's kind of like flaking out, not showing up, canceling plans, their appearance is changing, their weight is changing, they're not talking as they used to, you can typically tell that something is off. And many times we'll dismiss people by saying, gosh, they're always flaking. Ye to kabhi nahi aati.
Right.
And then we forget about them. Actually, when you feel like you need to brush somebody off is when we should actually lean in and check in and say, hey, are you okay? It's not necessary it's domestic violence, but it could be something else someone's going through. But I think checking in and then not forcing somebody to make the disclosure. You can just say, I'm a safe space. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. Take them out for a walk. They don't have to talk about that. Maybe they'll get to it when they want to. Right. And I think sharing helplines, if you're a socially active person, just sharing the helplines, because survivors are always there and they are looking for resources. And if somebody approaches you, just help them make the call. Maybe you're not the professional who can, figure out what's going on, but you could be the one person who gives a safe phone that's not tracked and they can make a call. Those are little things that can help a lot. Post the flyer or a helpline up in your workplace restroom. That is how many calls we've got from workplaces where they have seen something in a restroom or a library. So just those things help. And I think the red flags is being compassionate and being aware when someone's going missing, not to just cancel them out, but to think about what could it be.
That's really good to know. So make sure if you have someone who have you observed a change behavior, don't dismiss them. Reach out. It could be nothing, but it could also be potential.
It could be any kind of trauma, right? Just knowing that somebody cares for you can mean something.
That's really, really wonderful to know. So thank you so much for those guidelines for us. So how can we as community help?
Wow, that's a large, how much time do we have? So I will say one thing what we just talked about. Personally, you can help people by sharing information, showing up, supporting survivors, don't make jokes about it. But I think largely as a community, as a system, we need to have a culture that believes survivors. Instead of questioning when someone says, I've been harmed, if the first response can be, I'm so sorry you experienced that, not what did you do? Right? So many survivors say that they tried to speak up and the first response they got was either adjust kar lo, or, what did you do wrong? Or, maybe you have children and it'll go away. So there are so many ways you can dismiss somebody's pain. So don't dismiss the pain, but actually actively support the survivor. Don't judge. There's a lot of judgment that goes on in our community. Not everybody can have the perfect life. And if somebody is not having that, doesn't mean that they are not someone who's worthy of respect and dignity. And I think we are a very well-resourced community. We, a lot of us have money from the Silicon Valley. If you can't show up with your time, show up with your money. Support the people like us, not just us, any domestic violence agency, any agency working for human rights, social justice. Give your resource, because, people need money to rebuild. They can't just rebuild on hope and dreams and good wishes. So volunteer your time, donate your resources, believe survivors, and just create a culture in your community that practices support, non-judgmental support. So actually, I feel there's a lot community can do. Agencies are like 5, 13, 20 people, but community is so large.
Right.
If actually everybody gets involved, hamari zarurat hi na pade, to it would be wonderful.
Right. Yeah, make a safe haven for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, my dream is that we are never needed. Right. Like, if I can put myself out of business, that would be fantastic.
Right. Well, I hope it never happens. But again, you can do service and business on some other avenues.
I'm sure there'll always be some. There'll always be some cause needing support. But for now, we are here for anybody who needs it.
So that's actually really good to know. So tell our listeners and viewers, how can they reach to you? Like, what is the... Like if like you said, somebody posted something in the bathroom or the kitchen or the library or they are home and they only have a minute of a window to do what they have to do. So what is that one thing that they can call?
I think calling the helpline, that's 1-800-215-7308. That is really, really important. But before you make that call, it's important that you know that your phone is not tracked. So try to make sure you're safe. Like if you're using a computer, make sure that the history is not tracked or the phone is not tracked. So find a safe place, find a safe time, maybe work with a safe person, a safe friend who you know is going to support you, and call our helpline. And we'll take it from there. Especially if it's between 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that is when we are live. If you leave a voicemail for us after hours, we are checking it. If it's an urgent voicemail, we will try to call you back, but you have to let us know that it's safe to call you back. Other than that, if it's not something urgent, then I think it's, of course, you can join. We have a lot of workshops, community workshops we offer, where you don't have to say that I'm a survivor or anything. You can just come and be in a safe space, see if you like what's happening, feel, can I trust, and then kind of approach. Of course, if it's life-threatening, please call 911. Yeah. There's no question about that. So and I think most people are a good judge of what keeps them safe. And I want survivors to trust themselves. Trust your red flag, trust your instinct, trust your decision, and know that there is, help.
Something is, it's out there. And the first gut feeling is always right. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right.
And there are people who can, calling a helpline doesn't mean you're saying I'm being abused. You can just call to say, this is what I'm experiencing. Can you help me sort through? Is this abuse? Is it dysfunction? Is it something else? Can you help me think through it? Right. It's perfectly okay to just have a conversation. And that's what we are there for.
And when they call, say they are not in a situation or a place where they have to hang up or their life threatening situation, but if somebody is calling just to figure it out, if it's a domestic violence, if it's emotional abuse and stuff like that, what information do they have to have readily available for you guys?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. It's totally up to the person who's calling. There are people who don't want to give us even their names. So you don't need to give us information or any proof or anything for you to have a conversation. We are here to give emotional support and whatever clarity we are able to. If we are not the right people, we'll refer you or give you resources, but you don't have to give anything to us to get support. And all our services are also free. So we do have questions that we ask, when you are getting a service or something, but you don't have to.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's if you, like I said, I hope nobody is in this situation, but if you are in this flux situation, then you know what you have to do. We'll make sure that below the screen you are getting our helpline number. So what can we do as a society to prevent this?
Yeah. That's the holy grail. I think it begins with what we are doing, with what blueprints we are developing with our children. Because by the time somebody gets old and their habits and blueprints
It's
are
embedded,
formed. Yes,
right.
by the time the helpline rings, it's already past the point of prevention. But I do think having a lot more open conversations, changing the way we are parenting to create healthy parents, I think changing ourselves is what changes the future. So if we can role model healthy behaviors, because violence is a learned behavior.
Right.
It's not like people, generally folks are not
right.
born wanting to be, but you experience violence, and then that's what perhaps you are normalizing and giving back to the world. So I think as parents, we can do a lot. As caregivers, we can do a lot. As community adults, we can do a lot. Grandparents can do a lot. I think prevention is largely us changing ourselves.
So
today.
be the change that you want to
Exactly.
see. So that's wonderful. We are almost to the end of our segment. So what one word of wisdom or advice you want to give with someone who is thinking, after listening, hopefully they have the courage to call Narika, or someone who has survived. And so what one word of wisdom and advice you would want to leave them?
I wouldn't say wisdom or advice. I'm going to say solidarity. Please know that you're not alone. Please know that we are here to help. Please know that if you want to help, then your wisdom and experience is very valued. So, trust your red flags, as you were saying. And if you want to have a conversation, call our confidential helpline. Just know that you're not alone. I think one of the biggest things that people tell us always is, I didn't know that services existed. So please know that you're not alone and give it a try. It's a confidential helpline. Have a confidential conversation. And you never know where it takes you. So, it is courageous to call the helpline. There's no doubt about that.
That's what I was going to say. The first step is always difficult.
The hardest.
Yeah.
The hardest.
So take that first step. And could you just tell the number one more time?
Yes, it's 1-800-215-7308. That's the Narika Confidential Helpline.
Thank you so much. So we were talking to Shailaja from Narika, and this was our episode of Unsung Heroes of South Asian Community. We will be back next week with another unsung hero from our community. Till then, take care, keep smiling, be considerate and compassionate to others. Thank you.
Thank you.